And welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. Christian Clemente here, joined tonight by Jason Caldwell. Jason, I think before we get going with tonight's recruiting podcast, well, I say tonight, we're recording it on Monday night, it'll be up on Tuesday for y'all. Just want to plug that we just started a 50% off promo over at auburnundercover.com for the tip-off of basketball season. So for all of the basketball fanatics out there, I understand that this is a football recruiting podcast, and that's what we're going to talk about. But just wanted to plug that if you're not a member of auburnundercover.com, good opportunity to join us. But Jason, football recruiting keeps churning on. We're recording this on November 4th, exactly 1 month away from December 4th, which is the early national signing day, or the beginning of that period, although players always sign usually on the first day anyway. So we were a month away from signing day. As crazy as it is to say that, the class has kind of flown by, and the fact that signing day got moved up this year definitely advances things a little bit as well, changes the schedule certainly a good bit for how you're hosting visitors. And Auburn's class is in a really strong spot. You know, we were talking about it earlier. There's not a whole lot for us to talk about. There's only a handful of guys. So we're going to split the show up a little bit. We're going to start off talking about with some of the big key visitors that were in for the Vandy game. And then we're going to finish the show talking about some high school football a little bit. We're going to preview the Alabama State playoffs and the 1A, 2A, 3A, 6A, and 7A classifications, because all of those have teams that have Auburn commits, and there's some Auburn targets in 4A and 5A as well, but no commits. So for the sake of not recording for an hour and a half, we're going to skip past those tonight. But we'll start off with some of the big visitors that were on campus this weekend. One quick note, five-star defensive tackle Justice Terry did not make it in for a visit. Always thought it was kind of a long shot that Auburn would be able to get him anyway. The fact that he didn't show up for his planned visit, I don't want to say fully eliminates him because you never know, but we were not tracking him that closely anyways.
Correct.
And a big reason for that is because we've been tracking Joseph Mbachu really heavily, and he was in this weekend for his official visit. Now, I had some friends in town, and so it was actually Nathan that went and talked to him after his OV, but from talking to people on campus, from knowledge going into the weekend, feels like Auburn's in a really, really strong spot here to keep adding to its really strong defensive line haul.
Yeah, no, we've talked about this class, and we've talked about the shortcomings of this current Auburn team, and much of those reside on the lines of scrimmage, and it's because they haven't recruited or retained very well either on the offensive line or defensive line. In those previous 4 or 5 years, you look at it, and this Auburn defensive line class is really strong already. But you're going to be losing a big chunk of guys, a lot of older guys, experienced guys, and they're continuing to want to build this thing through the high school ranks. So you look at a guy like Joseph Mbachu, and as you look at him and you go, that's what it's supposed to look like. A guy that hasn't played a lot of football, still very much learning the game. But this is a guy that you feel like you need, if you can get in on the ground floor with, that here in a couple of years, you start to see a guy that has a chance to really take off and do some big things. And especially if you don't have to, this is not a Malik Blockton situation. Malik Blockton was advanced in terms of, hey, this guy's ready to play mentally, from a fundamental standpoint. Joseph Mbachu probably not going to be that guy. Now, physically, he could be. But this is a guy that you're thinking about long-term, getting a guy in your program, and a guy that has NFL ability on the back end. And so, Auburn has made a strong push. Those connections at that school are big. And yet it kind of feels like Auburn's in a pretty good spot right now.
One other name, actually, I forgot to even mention in pre-show before we started recording, Jason, but who did show up also from Grayson, Nick Brooks, the massive 4-star offensive tackle, maybe a guard at the next level. Kind of interesting to see what he would be. Committed to Texas. He hadn't been to Auburn, honestly, in quite some time. Interesting kind of high school recruitment where he was from Iowa, moved down to Georgia, moved back to Iowa, back down to Georgia now at Grayson for his senior year. You talked about some of the connections that Auburn has at that school, especially with a guy like Kenyatta Watson. Mm-hmm. It gives you an avenue to get in there. And so Nick Brooks pops up on campus. Now, from the Texas side of things, Texas doesn't appear very concerned about it. From the Auburn side of things, Auburn feels cautiously optimistic, I guess you could say, that they feel like they have a chance here. They feel like they could get him back for an official visit, maybe for the Texas A&M game. And you talk about the offensive line class that you already have. We just talked about the D-line. If you could add Nick Brooks, whether he's a tackler or a guard, one of him or Tavares Dice can be your right tackle. The other one could play guard probably, and he'd be pretty set if you were able to get Nick Brooks. Now, there's still a long way to go there with a short amount of time left to go for that matter. But it was really interesting, Jason, that he was on campus.
Yeah, and quite honestly, physically, he's a mountain of a guy like Percy Lewis, but he's a much better athlete and in much better shape than Percy Lewis. And so you start thinking about like Percy Lewis can be a serviceable left tackle at time. I'm not ruling out end up being a left tackle as he continues. I mean, he looks much different than he did, say, when we saw him last February, in February of 2023 to now, because he's a different looking player. And so you look at him going, man, can that guy get to 325? Because he's probably 345 right now, but he doesn't look fat because he's a big old kid.
Yeah.
He's a guy that has potential, I think, to be a probably more right tackle. But I mean, I think he's a guy that could get a shot at left tackle. And I do think he's a guy that if you're Auburn, you can sell that to, going, look, you have the potential to play early. Just look at, whether it be Connor Lew because of that position. Look, like you're going to have an opportunity. And so I think that's a selling point for Auburn for a guy like that.
Yeah, we always see names pop up over the final month to 6 weeks going into signing day. Names resurface, names pop up. Justice Terry popped up. Looks like he's kind of disappearing. Last year it was Amaris Williams popped up, and then Auburn obviously got him. Nick Brooks might be one of the latest names that pops up late, and you take kind of a late swing at, and you just see kind of where things are at there. A name, I think we'll wrap up here in terms of visitors. Two names that are not popping back up again because they've been targets for a very long time now. Na'eem Offord, the 5-star cornerback committed to Ohio State from Parker, been to campus now for his third game, also been to campus for at least one practice visit as well. Plenty familiar with Auburn, plenty familiar with the coaches. Each visit, I don't know how much it's moving the needle necessarily because I feel like we both think that Auburn stands in a pretty decent position to pull off that flip down the stretch. Now, it'll just be about kind of sealing the deal over the next month here.
Yeah, I agree. I think Auburn has put itself in as good a position as you can be in at this stage of the game. If Auburn's 7-2 or 8-1 right now, probably already in. And I don't know that it's necessarily the deciding factor for him, but I think for him, you're probably looking at going, okay, we'll make sure that they're on the track I think they are. But I do think that the relationships with this staff, with whether it be Wesley McGriff and Charles Kelly in the back end, and Hugh Freeze recruiting him personally and doing the job, obviously Kenyatta and all the guys involved, this has been a group effort by this Auburn staff, and they've given themselves a great shot. They've talked about wanting to kind of shore things up in the state of Alabama, and that's the kind of the last remaining piece, really. Zion Grady's still out there, but it feels like Na'eem Offord is kind of the last piece where they're like, hey, we're making a push for this guy. So it'd be a big one for sure.
Another one in the back end, Duty, Shamar Arnaud. Duty is nickname from Carrollton, Georgia. Auburn looked like they were in a pretty decent spot in the summer there for a little bit. USC kind of comes in a little bit late and gets his commitment. But Auburn has not relented since. He's been to Big Cat since committing to USC, been to Auburn for, I think, maybe 2 games, plus the Vandy game, either 2 or 3 games this fall. Plenty familiar with Auburn, plenty familiar with Charles Kelly, Crime Dog, Kenyatta, the same crew as Na'eem. All those guys have been pushing for him. And, people will ask, is this because Auburn doesn't have confidence in Na'eem Offord? Is it because they don't have confidence in keeping Donovan Starr? Stuff like that. Auburn wants as many cornerbacks as they can get. Auburn wants as many high school players as they can get in this class. They've made it clear that's where they want to build this roster from. And Shamar Arnaud is just one of those guys. It is not because of a lack of confidence with other things. It is they like Shamar Arnaud. They think he can contribute, and they want to add him. And it feels like, honestly, that they're in a pretty good spot to do it as well.
Yeah. I mean, Na'eem has been on the radar for a while, Shamar Arnaud was on the radar, but it was a June camp, that 7-on-7, where his took a different level. I mean, he was extremely good, and since that day, like, Auburn has turned up the heat tremendously for him. And so you're right. Right now in this day and age, especially because you're not really sure what the roster is going to look like. Could it be, 105 scholarships? Do you have an extra spot? You look at Auburn right now and look at the corners and go, man, how quickly it can change. You take all these guys and see what happens, because you're going to have room and they're going to push for playing time. And so, yeah, I think if you get both those guys, absolutely you take them. Feel good about Auburn getting at least one of them, but we'll have to see which one, it winds up being.
Yeah. Other couple names just to mention, worth throwing out there real quick. The Harris twins, defensive lineman from North Carolina in the 2026 class. Aiden Harris is ranked in the composite as the number 1 defensive lineman in the country. His brother Andrew Harris is a top 30, top 35-ish defensive lineman in the country. Both big old kids, and both of them looking at Auburn really, really heavily. I mean, Aiden Harris said that he told his mom, Auburn looks like it might be the place, and they want to come to a decision kind of soon. So that was eye-catching for sure. That one was really interesting. Jared Curtis was on campus, although I didn't hear the best things about how that visit went necessarily with the 5-star quarterback, so not really going to touch on him too much. Almost all of the commits were there as well, of course. So, Jason, I think from there, let's transition and let's talk about some high school football playoffs a little bit. Yeah. Alabama starts the playoffs this Friday, although some games are starting Thursday, I think, because of weather. I know Saraland's game got moved to Thursday. Jason, do you want to work our way up from 1A or do you want to work down from 7A?
It doesn't matter, whichever way you want to go.
Okay, let's go 1A first, because we'll probably have a little less to talk about.
Yeah,
starting down there. 1A, obviously Alvin Henderson down there. Auburn's running back commit at Elba. He is just 65 yards away from reaching 10,000 career rushing yards, which should happen in Friday's game against Verbena. Another interesting team in the 1A playoffs, Jason, Wadley, with Jaquez Wilkes, who has not been to Auburn in a while, but a really talented 2026 defensive player. I say player because I don't know where he fits in exactly, linebacker, edge maybe.
Yeah, and plays running back for this 1A school at 6'4", 225, and has put up some pretty good numbers for them doing it.
Yeah, so it's those guys, and then Jason, who are just some other teams that kind of stick out to you in that bracket?
You start looking at 1A football, and you look in the South, and that's normally where you point to Leroy. Leroy's always good. They were a region winner. Sweetwater's they were a powerhouse from years back. They've been a really good team. Then Elba potentially could meet up with Linden. Linden's another one that's been really good. That could be a potential second-round matchup. So those guys in the South. In the North, you mentioned Wadley. Wadley's been really good, and so they're a region winner up top. Start looking at some of the other ones. Lynn is another school that for years was really good, has a chance. Hackleburg has been good, and then Spring Garden, some other tools. I would say Wadley on that top side would be the school that I would lean towards probably, but you look at especially one of those other ones, maybe a Lynn or Hackleburg, somebody like that. Maybe Meek, who's a team that can score and do some things. They could be interesting as well.
Jason, I'm going to put you on the spot for all of these brackets that we're going to look at here, and I'm going to have you pick a winner. Who's your 1A winner?
Yeah, man, it's hard because it's hard. You don't see as many of those schools, and so I don't know when push comes to shove for me. I would probably go with a school like Leroy, maybe a little bit. I think they've got such a history, and they've been so good for so long. Look at a little bit of them. They lost to Thomasville early in the season, but since that time, they've been on a pretty strong roll. They've outscored their opponents 303 to 122 this year. So I'm going to go with the Leroy Bears on 1A.
Okay, I like that. Up to 2A, J.J. Falk and Highland Home. Obviously, C.J. May, the Louisville commit, is at Highland Home as well. They've got some other fun players as well. Got to see them play earlier this year. They're going to be one of the main teams kind of to watch. But Jason, who else should people watch out for in the 2A?
Yeah, man, the 2A, when you look at that, it may be as tough as any classification. Obviously, 7A is going to be really good, but you look at 2A on the bottom half, and you look at a couple of schools for me. Obviously, Highland Home is there. They're going to be really good. They're tough. They're physical, athletic. And then you got to look at Reeltown. Reeltown is man, that's a good football team. And you look at them, maybe potentially a Highland Home Reeltown matchup in the semifinals of the South. I think that's where we're going to be headed. The northern half. You look at some of those schools. Pisgah's been really good. Right now, if I had to guess, out of the north in 2A, I would probably go Pisgah from the north. You look at what they've done. They've been really good. They lost to Sylvania last week, but they beat Fife earlier in the year. Now it was Fife without our boy running back, but Pisgah's scored 432 points this season in 10 games. So that's an averaging 43 points a game. I'm gonna say Pisgah in the north, and either that Highland Home Reeltown matchup is going to be fun to watch in the South. I believe that's where we're headed. I'm going to go with Highland Home. I think it's their time. That's kind of been their hurdle. I'm going to give Highland Home the 2A.
Okay, there we go. Moving on up to 3A here. I actually did not have it pulled up. There we go. Southside Selma with Derek Smith and Eric Smith. The twins. Obviously, Derek committed to Auburn. Don't think Eric is too far behind him after visiting this past weekend. Jason, a team we got to see earlier this year. Glenwood in 3A looks like they're going to be really, really strong. You just mentioned Fife as well. Those are three of the teams that instantly kind of stick out to me. Obviously, Southside Selma being, with the Smith brothers. But looking at Glenwood, looking at Fife, and some of these other teams as well.
Yeah, that one for me. Obviously, we've seen Glenwood. I think Glenwood's going to be really tough to beat. Southside Selma, I think Derek and them are pretty good for round one against Hillcrest Evergreen. Probably going to run into Montgomery Academy in round two. And we saw that Montgomery Academy team at the Auburn team passing camp. They got a couple of really good receivers. And so I would say Montgomery Academy, Glenwood, probably in a quarterfinal on that one side. I think Glenwood and T.R. Miller in the South. And I think T.R. Miller is a team that's going to be really good. Miles Johnson, the former Alabama linebacker commitment, has been playing running back for them. They've been really good. So I'm going to lean towards T.R. Miller probably a little bit against Glenwood in the South. And then, you look at Fife and you go and you get healthy, and it's hard to bet against that team. Mars Hill would be the other one for me. So I'm going to go Fife, Mars Hill, maybe Piedmont, but they've kind of rebounded really well. But I'm going to go Fife or Mars Hill up top. It's hard to go against Fife, and I'm going to say Fife, T.R. Miller. I'm going to give T.R. Miller the edge in 3A.
6A honestly might be one of the most fun brackets as I'm just looking down the list here. Up top you have Pike Road, Bessemer City. Right below it, Helena, St. Paul's. Unfortunately, Jason, I think Pike Road is without Cason Myers, the quarterback, which is kind of unfortunate because Pike Road against St. Paul's would be really fun, with St. Paul's having Anthony Tank Jones. Keep going down the list here. You've got Benjamin Russell playing against Spanish Fort. So C.D. Morgan, Saraland playing Chelsea, Spain Park. They have some fun younger players. They're playing McGill Tulane in the first round. Keep going down here. Athens. So Spencer Dolan plays against Homewood.
Yep.
Parker Coleman. Parker could potentially play Mountain Brook in round two. I feel like those teams play each other.
Yeah,
it'll
be a rematch from earlier in the year.
Yeah. Clay Chalkville plays Gadsden City. Gadsden City has Zion Gibson, the 2026 corner that Auburn really likes. So there's a lot of really talented, really good teams here that I don't know exactly where things will go, to be honest. I would lean maybe towards Parker a little bit. I feel like they're just so talented that it might be their time, but there's a lot of, Saraland is really good. There's a lot of different ways this one could go. I really don't.
Yeah, I agree. You look at South. I think a sneaky, interesting matchup is Russell County, Spain Park, potentially in week 2. Russell County, can score. They're really good offensively. Quarterback has put up some huge numbers. It's still hard for me to maybe go against Saraland coming out of that South. I still think they're probably the most complete team, but I think Saraland, Spain Park, I think that's where it comes down to in the South. I lean a little bit towards Saraland because of the experience, but Spain Park's been really good. And then up north, you're right. I mean, Oxford has quarterback commitment. Louisville, he's been really good. And you look at that top half, Hartselle is just a gritty, solid team. That could be a really good second round matchup there. And then, you mentioned Spencer Dolan and Athens as a 3 seed. Not a bad matchup going to Homewood early on. But yeah, you look at the bottom half of that with Parker potentially. Southside Gas has had a good season, but Mountain Brook is just tough. Potential second round matchup there, and then Clay Chalkville at the bottom. I lean towards that Parker Clay Chalkville matchup down there at the bottom half. Oxford up top. I don't know. I'm going to go with Parker, but I think Oxford Parker potentially matching up to go to the state championship game would be a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, that'd be a really fun game. 6A just has a ton of potential for a bunch of different fun matchups. A lot of different teams coming out of there. And then Jason wrapping things up with 7A. We have some really interesting matchups really early on if teams win that we expect to win. Auburn and Thompson look like they will probably match up in round 2. If Auburn takes care of Bob Jones and Thompson takes care of Daphne, that's usually a matchup that you see in the state title game, not in round 2. You look at it, you keep going down the list. Mary G. Montgomery plays Vestavia Hills. The winner of that likely plays Central. If Hoover beats Fairhope and Opelika beats Florence, those 2 teams are matching up in round 2. You have a lot of really early fun matchups there in 7A.
Absolutely. You're looking, obviously we're talking about, Thompson, 3 Auburn commitments at Thompson, and obviously potentially matching up with Auburn High School in the second round if they get by Daphne. Daphne's a talented team. Playing at home, you would definitely lean towards Thompson there, but they got to get a little bit more offense, and that's been the question for them has been kind of the skill players. But obviously, you look at those guys and what Jared Smith and Anquan Fagans on defense do for that team, and then obviously got a young talented quarterback, but they haven't clicked a whole lot on offense. Auburn has played extremely well. This is an Auburn team that's deep and athletic and talented. They got a bunch of just good football players. They don't have as many D1 guys as other teams, but they got a bunch of guys that just can play football. Caleb Pitts has been really good. LaMichael Gunn's been good. Obviously, our guy Omar Mapson has been great. But look outside and Peyton Plott, another one of these small, quick, lightning fast wide receivers that is just really tough. That'll be the matchup of the day is Anquan Fagans and Peyton Plott, and kind of how that factors in if we see those 2 in round 2. And I think that's what we'll see. Bottom half, Eric Winters, a long trip from Enterprise to Decatur to play Austin. That's a long way to go for a first round game. But Enterprise is a really talented team. You're talking about 3, D1 high major D1 guys at Enterprise, and Christian, we've seen them twice. It's the playoffs now. We hadn't seen a ton of Eric Winters on offense. If Enterprise wants to go, then he's going to have to play.
Him and Andrew Purcell.
Yeah, him and Andrew Purcell are going to have to play 95% of the snaps for Enterprise when they get in the playoffs, and they can do it. I wouldn't be surprised if they go up there and win at Austin. And they play the winner of Baker and Hewitt Trussell. Hewitt Trussell scores a bunch of points. Baker's a team that, kind of came out of nowhere last year, and you look and go, man, here they are again, big, young, athletic quarterback, but a coach that's he was at Hewitt Trussell. So he has a little bit of a feel for what Hewitt Trussell does, but I could see Enterprise, Hewitt Trussell second round, and Vestavia, Central Phoenix City, and Oklahoma. If you have those matchups in the second round where it's those 2 regions, and it very well could be, it could be those 2 regions all matching up in the second round. I like Auburn. We've seen them a couple times. I just don't see any holes for that roster. I think Auburn is a team that will be tough to beat, especially if they don't have to leave home, and I think that would be the case for them. The Opelika Hoover matchup may be one if we get to that one. maybe as much fun as any. This Hoover team, Jonah Winston's playing well. Matt Beeson, quarterback's playing well. They got a familiar name on the other side. Reggie Torber's son's playing outside linebacker and doing some things for that Hoover front. And then, you look at that Opelika defensive front, and the running game for them has been great. Malik Autry and that group have been good. The 7A is going to be a lot of fun. I kind of lean towards Auburn. I wouldn't be shocked if Opelika gets there. I think Opelika Hoover, one of those two, gets there, and I think it's setting up for a fun game in Birmingham at Protective Stadium there at UAB, and what will be a busy day, right, Christian? Because there's a whole lot of stuff going on that day.
Yes, it will be. December 4th. Circle it on your calendar. Sign-in day. We will have coverage start rolling probably around 5:30 a.m. as usual. Sign-in day will go all the way usually until mid-afternoon or so. It wraps up earlier than it usually used to, I would say. Wraps up maybe around 3 o'clock. You can follow that with Auburn at Duke basketball. And then, just like you mentioned, will be the start of the championship round with 7A there on that Wednesday on December 4th. So that is going to be a really long day. Going to be a really fun day, no matter what happens. It's going to be really fun to cover, really fun to watch everything that's going down. But going to be a really long day. Before we get to then, obviously we will have the playoffs. We will have coverage of that. We will be going everywhere, going different places. We've already seen pretty much all of these guys. The only team we still kind of need to see is Southside Selma, hoping they win in round 1 and could see them, against Montgomery Academy or something like that in round 2. That'd be fun.
Yep.
But outside of that, seeing all these guys, seeing Elba, seeing Highland Home, seeing Auburn, Opelika, Thompson, we've been pretty much everywhere.
A couple times, yeah. It's been good, and now you get to kind of see some of these fun matchups. Those potential week 2 matchups that we talked about could make it to where we may have to split into 4 different places and send people everywhere, because there's going to be a bunch of really fun games going on that night, and looking forward to it. The best time of the year, and so excited to see what happens.
Yeah, so appreciate everyone tuning in. Not even sure, honestly, what the podcast schedule will look like for the rest of the week, to be completely honest, with basketball season starting up, with Auburn football being on a bye week. So honestly, just stay tuned to auburnundercover.com for that. We'll make sure to keep y'all updated. There will be consistent podcasts. I just don't know what they will be exactly. And then next week, since it is a bye week for recruiting, maybe we'll try and get a guest on or something like that. We'll see who we can wrangle up to hop on the show with us, whether it's a commit, whether it's a personnel staffer or something like that. We'll see if we can't get somebody to hop on with us. If y'all have any requests that are reasonable or possible, we'll try and get them on. Y'all drop that in the comments, whether on YouTube or at auburnundercover.com or whatever. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel. We'll